Welcome back to the 7th grade Mustache. On today's episode, we'll be speaking about the invisible worlds. The reality that we occupy is layered with different levels of existence. And we are asleep and unaware, and we take for granted these levels of existence. Where we are ignorant, there is knowledge and benefit. And all we have to do is simply plumb these depths to find information and abilities that could greatly benefit us. So, for example, in the world of human energy, or the energy between people, there are thought forms that are created in your mind. Not your brain, your mind. And these thought forms travel back and forth. Some people are more sensitive than others to these thought forms. The problem, though, is that the people who have a dull, akashic existence tend to get confused, and they don't realize that the thoughts of others are invading their own thoughts. And they think that they're going crazy, or they may be having weird thoughts, but sometimes you're just receiving thoughts from other people and you don't realize it. And these things can be greatly confusing. So you have to go forward in life realizing that if you have thoughts that you don't recognize as your own, they're probably not your own. But this stems from the fact that we live not in empty space in between us, but space that's filled with radio waves that are created by us and other human beings, by animals, and by small little creatures, and even insects. And so, because of this, you can use this to create a receiver or amplifier in your mind or in your mind's eye to tune out or to focus on some of those wavelengths. Some people are animal people, or they're like a dog person or a cat person. And that person is that way because they are born tuned to animals, or they have grown accustomed to being around animals. And so therefore they have tuned themselves to the frequency of animals. They're sensitive to the energy of animals or emotions of animals. And people would like to tell you, well, dogs don't have a soul or cats don't have a soul. How do you know? How the fuck do you know? Because that's a creature that is clearly aware on some level. And these animals sense your emotional content, your emotional level. Like if you have the blues and you have a dog, your dog knows it. Your dog is aware of these things. Hell, these animals can see spirits and entities that are not visible to the naked eye. And yet, we give away so much of our power to scientists and scientism to look to these people to, how could I say? We look to these people to explain the world to us when we shouldn't be really asking them to explain things that they don't fully understand themselves. And so, in this world of radio waves, organic radio waves, we'll say that. In this world of organic radio waves, we are swimming in all this information, and some of it harmful, some of it not so harmful. For example, when you're traveling and you go to a hotel, everybody agrees to go to sleep around the same time. So if you look at a hotel from an astral plane level, there's a bunch of human spirits in this Hot Wheels shoebox action figure carrying case of spirits just resonating, and there's all this energy, and it's like a goldfish bowl of human spirits. That's what like a hotel looks like, or any other place that's gathered where there's a bunch of people. But the reason why I bring up a hotel is because people are sleeping and dreaming around the same time.
There's
So
a bunch of residue left over from other people.
a lot of it,
And
and see, that's a good point because these hotels tend to they contain residual energy. So,
and
uh,
also, a hotel's kind of intimate too. I'm not talking about a sexual level. I'm talking about like when you go to a hotel. Say you're in there in town for a convention, or you're in town for for a family event, anything, family reunion, something like that, maybe a funeral. That's a lot of powerful energy. That's a lot of emotion. You're working to get a bunch of stuff done, and then you come back and you got to rest for a moment. You have a lot of like I said, a residual, not just energy, but emotion and stuff, that's left there. And so suppose if you're sensitive, you'll pick that up. You know, you, sometimes it's hard for us to recognize what my brother's saying. Sometimes you don't recognize your own thoughts from somebody else's because we come in contact with so many people and we cohabitate different areas. And, sometimes it's negative. You can have, um, you always see this on Ghost Hunters and stuff where they talk about magnetic energy or electric energy beginning off can affect you, can
there you
cause
go.
anxiety, can cause this. But sometimes just the thoughts of other people, they still exist. That person's not there. And I'm not talking
Exactly
about
right.
people dying. I'm talking about somebody just passing through. And that stuff can be left over and you might pick it up. And so sometimes it's hard to distinguish your own thoughts from somebody else. And I think that, I'm not saying that mental health ain't a real thing, but I think that a lot of times people with mental health issues are doing that. They're
Okay.
getting sensitive to somebody else's plight or somebody else going through something. And they don't know how to be sympathetic without acting on it. Is that a good way to put it? You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? They don't know how to acknowledge somebody else's thoughts without them acting on them. Or
So
so it's
so check this out. So I went to a crime scene once, and I didn't realize it was a crime scene until after I'd been there for a minute, and I wasn't told by my employer that I was there to clean up a crime scene. And this place had a heaviness to it, and there was a hard. How can I say? There was a heavy cloud or a curtain of negative energy, right? And so I was going through the house and I was getting all this crap out of the house and stuff. And I get to the bedroom, and the way I was working like I was going like going along the walls, like pulling stuff out of this house. And so I go into the bedroom and I start pulling stuff out, but I didn't look to my left where the bed would be. I was just well there. Well, let me say that. Let me say this: that there was stuff blocking the entrance, so I had to like pull stuff out to get to the inner back walls of the bedroom. And so I was pulling out all these dressers and armoires and all this bullshit, and I finally get the doorway clear and the wall clear where the dresser would be at the foot of the bed. And then I turn and I look, and there is a huge blood splatter on the wall, and there's a pool of blood on the mattress.
mm,
And like right away, like everything that I had been feeling was answered. I was like, oh, somebody killed themselves in here, or somebody was murdered in here. And when you come upon that, it's like you're standing in thick water. It's like it's like you're in water. How can I explain this? Okay, have you ever been in the ocean and you see a shark? You ever been you ever been like okay, if you've ever been to the ocean and you've seen a shark or you've seen jellyfish in the water, right away your spirit man is like, hey, danger. You know what I mean? Like you feel it like
yeah.
right away. Like the primal man inside is like danger. So, but this was the after effect of that feeling. It was almost like, okay, I could feel that there was a residue of spirit energy here. Like, you know what I'm saying? You know how okay, I'll give you another analogy. You know, the day after the 4th of July, you go outside and you're a kid and you walk around and you're looking for firecrackers that haven't been exploded. And to get to those firecrackers that have been exploded, you're looking at the ground and you see all these explosion marks, and you see like all this gunpowder, and you see all this stuff that shows like signs of fireworks have been exploded. And the way that looks is the way this felt. You see what I'm saying? And so it was like there were firecrackers exploded in the spirit realm. And there was like explosions that happened, emotional explosions had happened in the spirit realm that weren't visible. That's the best way I can describe like what I felt when I was standing in that room where a dead person was probably 12 hours before.
But one of the worst ones I ever dealt with in that level is there's a bar here, called JP's, but it used to be called the Spaldings back in the day. And this is in Omaha. One of my best friends got killed there, and it took me a while to go in that place. And when I walk, if I'm walking on one side, I'm cool, but the side of where I think he got killed at, because again, I never inquired. You get that tingling sensation, you get the goosebumps. You get that heightened sense where, like,
the primal energy. It's primal. The vibe you got from like the Rogaroo, but like not like a watered down version from that.
Yeah. I'm detecting residual energy or something like that, and my body, your body does. It's not betraying you, but your body is letting you know, like, hey, there's something going on here. There's something here. And like I said, I'm not scared. But like I said, we were good friends. I know him for years. We were college buddies, so I know him over 20 years. And so he was shot and killed there. He was confronting the guy that murdered his brother and murdered him. So that energy still exists. Whatever's in there, whatever residue from my body recognizes the energy of one of my good friends.
Mm-hmm.
And like I said.
But it's nonverbal. It's a nonverbal communication. It's something that registers on a subconscious level.
That's exactly what it is. There's many forms of nonverbal communication, but our bodies detect stuff. And sometimes I think that we're so used to what people tell us doesn't exist, or this is real, this is not valid. And then instead of us acknowledging it and really realizing how to deal with it, you don't. And next thing you know, it's intertwined with your own memories or your own desires, and you don't realize that you're experiencing somebody else's emotion, or that that these situations are real. So sometimes you don't want it to be. So if you sit there and acknowledge it, recognize what it is, then you can deal with it a lot better. You're like, you know what? This is somebody else's memory. This is not mine. You got all these people who love to bring up like America's dirty past. We know slavery. We know how Native Americans have been dissed and disrespected, that kind of stuff. So you mean to tell me that at no time are you passing through one of these areas of regret, or one of these places that was taken from somebody, and there's not going to be some kind of effect on you? It's going to affect you. You might not directly recognize it, but it's going to affect you, and that's what we're talking about. Or people try to convince you that, how do I say, that what you're doing ain't a bad thing, but in your heart you know it is a bad thing. Like, man, this is business, this is ethical, but I don't think this is what a good person would do. That's your ancestors talking to you. Don't ignore your ancestors. Don't ignore the people that came before you. They're trying to warn you, or they're like, you know what, you weren't raised like this. And a lot of times the person that I think about is like my Aunt Essie or my Uncle Bussy. Those are two people that had a huge influence on me. Or like, you'll meet one of these sensitive people. They're trying to tell you like, hey, somebody watching out for you. Yeah, I know. You ain't got to tell me. You're in the person. I've been guided for years. I got family looking out for me all the time. Don't ignore your ancestors.
There was a funeral that I went to in the countryside of North Carolina, and we buried my uncle, one of my uncles. And it was a small church way out in tobacco country. And I mean, it was way out there, man, like in the country. Like we rode for a while to get there. Like, and there wasn't no highway. We weren't traveling down a highway to get there. Like we were traveling down a country road to get there, And so we're driving, and we finally get there, and we go inside the church, and it's small. This church is
we had portables in grade school. Like it was like a mini classroom. You could move them anywhere.
Yeah. So in elementary school, we had these things, and this church is about the size of one of those. It was a one-room church. It was small. When I walked in there, it felt like I was standing in whipped cream up to my chest, and that is what the old folks call the anointing. That's positive spiritual energy. I could feel this. It was thick and it was heavy. It wasn't invasive. It was welcoming though, but you could feel very spiritual people worship in this place, and a lot of spiritual energy had been exuded in this place. That experience is the polar opposite of what I felt when I went to that crime scene. But all of these things are nonverbal forms of communication. And what we're speaking about in this episode are these worlds that we're in that are layered on top of, inside of the world that we live in. There's a reason why they tell you not to live around power lines, because there's organic radio waves and there's inorganic radio waves, which are the byproduct of dirty electricity. And dirty electricity is becoming more and more popular as people begin to get sick from being too close to too many electrical devices. Now, the power went out there in much of Omaha. It was a couple of days ago, I think you told me. And I remember when the power would go out when I was a kid, and when the power would go out, it felt as if there was the earth had exhaled, because there was a stillness. That's what it was. There was a stillness that you felt. And this stillness, it was a reminder that we're in this fishbowl of inorganic, artificial electricity all the time, and we don't realize it. But it takes the power going out to feel that. Now, you said the power didn't go out in your neighborhood this time.
None of my house, but the power has been. It's still out from people's house. One of the homies from grade school. White brother of ours, he still ain't got power to this day. It's just a Friday. And
well, in the old neighborhood, on the north side, it's on.
He still stays up north. He hasn't got his back.
I'm talking about in my neighborhood. In my neighborhood, that shit's still on. Like the house, the electricity at the house is back on. My sister's house, my brother's. Yeah. But
I think one of the biggest things that you're bringing up is that people are thinking normal now. So you got a lot of people who probably haven't thought normal in a while, who haven't, had that voice of electricity, that voice of that dirty electricity, in their head. And so now people are like, hey, man, what the hell's going on? And people, you assume people are speaking up just because they don't have electricity and they're pissed off. No, they're speaking up because they're probably speaking with their own real mind for the first time in a long time. And the mind that hasn't been influenced by, the rat race, and I got to be here and there and all this other stuff. Mm-hmm. And there's electricity and these
5G, and so, 5G towers.
Yeah. And so, and trust me, the 5G towers were down. I couldn't even I could use my phone, but it would say it's the old or whatever. And so I definitely think that people don't realize that they were being themselves after not being yourself so long. And it's hard to even explain.
So,
but
okay. So with everything being off and everything being silent, it's as if people get a second to. It's a holiday in a way. It's a holiday away from all the noise, because all the noise gets turned off. But see, it's in those moments that you also realize that you are a creature on Earth, and Mother Nature is an element of nature. It's all of the elements of nature together, a composite of all those elements. And you're reminded of that when you see these things in the sky, or the elements of the sky knock down trees, and it knocks down homes, and it snatches them out their foundation, and it does weird stuff, like it takes a piece of pine straw or just straw, and it pushes it through concrete. Strange things like that, which makes no sense to the logical mind. But there's also cool stuff about these invisible worlds. So if you go back into the early 1800s, when the telegraph system was being built around the United States, they were laying these lines of these telegram poles and running the line in between them. But when they finally got this system built up, they began to get these reports about how the systems, or the batteries, the copper batteries, were being charged and being run by this unseen energy, because they would have to generate the electricity to get the telegram system to work, and sometimes the power would go out. And there were people along these lines, when a storm would come and it would knock down some of the poles, they would say that some of these lines are still working on their own energy, of their own accord, and nobody understood exactly what that was. They couldn't tell you what that was about. What it was is that some of these telegraph lines were built along what they call ley lines. And these ley lines they're a category of a science called geomancy. And geomancy is an old science that was used to build pyramids, used to build temples in Asia, used to build the Acropolis in Greece. All these sacred sites in human history were built along these power lines, or these pressure points along the earth.
Invisible ley lines of the planet. And they use it for communication.
It's the nervous system. It's the nervous system of the earth.
And if you ever notice how they talk about all these sacred sites are built along the same meridian, or same longitudinal lines and all this other stuff, and they cross-sect here and all this. You always hear them talk about these things on Ancient Aliens, or when they talk about, like you said, the building of the pyramids, or these sacred sites that are built in South America, and they coincide with sites in Africa and all these other places. Whatever it is, it shows that the ancients were in tune with this. And the other thing that we're convinced that our technology that we use now is better than what they had, and that's not necessarily the case. But there's definitely some kind of invisible system that's part of the earth, and that our ancestors knew about.
So when they were building the telegraph system, it became known that this energy in these ley lines and in these pressure points, or these power spots in the earth, would charge these copper boxes that were buried in the ground. And some of this energy wasn't just from the earth itself. There was earth energy, there were earth batteries, which is when you take two diodes and you stick them in the ground, either made out of copper or iron, and you can draw energy from the earth itself. But then there was also this solar energy that was invisible, but there were tides of this ocean energy, and these tides would rise and fall with the hours of the day and the time of the earth, the seasons and the equinoxes. And so this solar energy, this invisible ocean of electric energy from the ocean, was stored in rocks, in boulders, in mountains, in the quartz crystals inside these mountains. And so these rising tides in ocean energy could actually be scooped up in the form of these batteries and used. And Nathan Stubblefield of Kentucky had moved out west to investigate this stuff in the 1800s, and he had dozens and dozens of journals and experiments about these exact types of phenomena. But this Earth energy also has sound to it. And now it's been discovered that there is Earth stereo, which is a whole different type of class of sound that comes from the Earth itself. The Earth makes all different types of noises and on different frequency levels. And there's low power pirate radio stations on the West Coast that just play this stuff all day. And they'll play all different types of like unconventional sounds, but some of it has a melodic or musical quality to it. And so they say that each of the planets has its own sound or music. And it makes sense when you consider that the sun is like a hand that's strumming a guitar, and the each planet are like guitar strings, or it's an instrument. And so each of those instruments has a sound or a quality to it. The same way a guitar has a sound, a piano has a sound, clarinet has a sound, saxophone has a sound. Each planet would have its own sound, and depending on the time of year, it's going to sound different. But these things you start to discover when you go out into the woods, when you go out into nature, when you get away from all the radio waves and all the cell phone towers, and you get away. Dude, I was in the desert one time. I was deep in the desert. And I saw a Bureau of Land Management park ranger, and I talked to him for a second. And he was saying, hey, listen, if you need to use the phone, you got to go up on top of this mountain over here because you'll be within range of these cell phone towers that are way down in the valley. I'm like, all right, cool. But that reminded me that you could actually get away from these things, that you could get away from radio waves. You can get away from cell phones, reception. You can get away from all this stuff. And normally this is something that we consider a bad thing. But a shift in consciousness will show you that that's actually not bad. It's actually a good thing if you want to do experiments. If you want to truly experience stillness and peacefulness, you can go there. You can go to these places and be away from these things. But this also goes to something that I find interesting is how people go missing. People go missing in these national parks. And there was a little shorter period of time where German scientists were going on vacation in national parks. Only German scientists in this period of time were disappearing in West Coast national parks. And that's odd because if all these things that we talked about so far are true, this energy in the earth stereo sounds, the solar ocean of energy, electricity, then it's not that far of a mental leap to consider the fact that there are doors that open and close, and they're open at a certain time and they close at a certain time on their own. And if you're in the right place at the right time, you can step in between worlds into another one. And people often wonder, like, well, is Bigfoot real? How come you never found one? You know, these people talk about them all the time. They've seen them. Native Americans have been talking about them for centuries. What's up with that? Well, it's because they're stepping through doors. And they know, or they can see, because their eyes are attuned to these doors. And they know when they can walk through that door and get to some other place. We talked about Skinwalker Ranch in Utah many episodes ago. And we talked about how there were black buffalo soldiers on Skinwalker Ranch that were having spiritual, psychic warfare with a certain tribe of Native Americans. And they were going back and forth, fighting each other in spiritual warfare, all in a place that was a spiritual arena where all these crazy phenomena was known to happen. So, you know, people always talk about they want to be the first to do this. They want to explore this. Well, man, I am interested in that kind of shit. I want to see what is on the other side of these doors. Let's stick a camera in there and see what we can see on the other side of that door. Well, that door might not open. Bullshit. That door appeared and it will reappear again. Now time may move and behave differently in that door or inside that space or whatever that realm is, but there's something over there and it keeps opening and closing. So, but these things are fascinating because it's the unknown. You know, we will watch all these documentaries on Discovery Channel or the History Channel about the mysteries of the unknown or America's hidden secrets. Dude, there are so many things that are unknown. There are so many levels to this existence that we don't explore because we like to stay comfortable in cowardice. We don't want to go beyond and see what else. But see, I'm interested in this because I'm convinced that my ancestors were adventurous people. That the people who lived in the world 5,000 years ago were doing some next level shit, stuff that wasn't written down. I mean, think of all of the events that your ancestors have been involved in that were never written down, that they may not even told other people about because it was so way far out there, and that the society they were living in was so narrow and small brain, they didn't discuss it. You know what I mean? Especially back then, like people were so tight-lipped about everything. You know what I mean? You'd be lucky to get a nugget of a cool ass story. But anyway, like I was saying, there's levels to these different worlds we live in. For example, there in 2023, Chimney Rock is going to have between it and another stone structure near there, the moon is going to be rise right between Chimney Rock and another stone. Oh, it's Pikes Peak. Pikes Peak and Chimney Rock. The moon is going to be right there, smack dab in the middle of that. And there were some archaeologists recently that figured this out. And they said, well, this would be the best time to go and see these things. And I think it's important to share these things with your family. Like, it's one thing to go and do it by yourself, but if you can take like small children to these things, then these kids have a greater sense of self, and they realize that they are part of something bigger, that they should actually lift their heads up from their tablets and their phones once in a while and look at the sky, because the stars remind you, like the movie Roots did, that behold, the only thing that is greater than yourself. And so these are reminders of your greatness. See, this is essentially what this episode is about. Is the invisible world is a reminder of your greatness. And I've said this many times, I'll say it again. We give away our power too frequently. We give away the things that make us great. We give it away to other people. We subordinate ourselves. There are so many times I've seen powerful people give away their power. You know? Especially when it comes to your health. That's another thing. There are so many things, so many mechanisms inside yourself that we don't choose to learn about in regards to our own health, in regards to things that can keep us in a vibrant state. Man, we talk about this a lot. Like, we talk about this shit a lot off the mic, and how, there's things that I experience, there's things you experience. It's not normal shit.
When I go through some major shit, and I'm not talking about like that, I'm like, when I'm seeing like the other side, I'm like, hey, cuz I've seen some shit in the sky. I need to run this by you. And you don't doubt me. And the thing is that when we were going through it, I'd be like, hey, if you do this, you're going to see something, cuz. And then eventually you're like, hey, I see it. I'm like, yeah, dude. Like, for a while, you were like, I ain't seen the same type of UFOs you've seen. I'm like, dude, you want to see this shit? Cool. But I'm trying to tell you.
Or if I tell you, hey, man, I was out here on top of a mountain and I heard the word. See, that's another thing. I was on the top of a mountain one time And instinctually, I started doing my martial arts forms. I started practicing my forms. I was all alone. I started practicing my martial arts forms. And then I sat down and I began to meditate. And then, as soon as I stopped meditating, I heard something coming from the direction of the sunrise. And, excuse me, the sunset. And this sound, it was like all of my favorite songs were being played at the same time, and it was like I was hearing all of them for the first time. And it was coming from this sunset, but it was also coming from the center of everything. And
And that's what I mean by experience. You're experiencing something. You can't. The first time you hear a song and it grabs you. Like sometimes they play a song the first time, you don't even listen to it. But a real song that's like main source. I'm looking at the front door. I remember hearing that the first time. That's such a dope song.
yeah,
That's it. You're experiencing nature on that same level.
that's right. But what it was like the sun wasn't an object anymore. It was like a door. It was like I was looking, sound was coming through this, it was a keyhole. That's what the sun said, or it was a keyhole. And this sound was coming through this keyhole that was coming from the center of everything, the center of creation. But at the same time, this is what it sounded like. Oh. And Christianity is the word. In Hindu, it's the Om, which is the word. And there's a similarity between those two religions or spiritual practices right there, is the word. And what this was a frequency of God, the voice of the Creator. And I heard this, I didn't hear it with my ears, though, is what I'm telling you. I heard this with all of the cells in my body. Never, ever had I felt anything like that before. All the cells in my body, I could hear this. It was lit. It was fire beyond imagination.
Look, what makes it hard to describe this is that if things happen to you too young or too early in your development, there's no point of reference. And then when things happen later on in your development, when you're further along, they stick with you a lot longer. I may have talked about this on the air before, but I remember I had a professor in college, and he was my philosophy professor, but he was so much more. In fact, a little bit ago, he was managing, athletes and stuff. Good dude, but he was like, he told me to do something, and he called it a self-realizing activity. He said, the first thing you do in the morning when you wake up is you thank God. The moment you gain consciousness, say, thank you, Father. He said, basically just pray. And the first time I did this shit, I had some kind of magic awakening. I literally practiced okay. As soon as I recognize that I'm no longer asleep, as soon as I recognize I'm conscious, thank God, and I kind of practiced, and I did it. And the first time I did it, it's like you could, how was it? I could see sound and I could hear colors. I couldn't describe it, but it was
synesthesia. Synesthesia.
It was a pulsating awakening of enlightenment that hit me all at the same time, and I was like, this is real. So I ran back and told him, then I'm going to do the next 3 or 4 days. You can't do it again. Once you can't. It was an experience that I did not expect, and that's what you doing your cadences, your martial art. It opened up a door in your enlightenment, and where I'm not saying it just took you to the other side. I'm saying that it made you aware of the other side. It made you aware that that word God is not just a word. There's something to that. It made you aware that this spirituality, that your spirit is touching something else, and that's some real shit. You dig? And so when these things happen, it's hard. I'm lucky enough to have a brother where I can communicate this stuff to and talk about, hey, bro, you ain't gonna believe what I went through. And I'm high as fuck, and I ain't a drug in sight.
Ate, smoked nothing, drank nothing.
No, yeah, this is just God messing with me, talking to me, or whatever. And like Roscoe knows, I don't smoke weed. I don't use drugs. I mean, I might pop a pill here and there, if the doctor gives me something. But that's not my goal. That's not my thing. And so when you're completely clear in your head and you get to another dimension, you're going to remember it. You're going to recall that. And I got a couple of those situations, and having a brother that I could communicate it to, like, hey, bro, I've been through this, and he doesn't even try to get on. I've been through something similar. That's not it. It's not some kind of competition and who's more spiritual. It's like,
No,
man, no shit. Yeah.
no. I mean, for example, man, like recently, I've been having some vivid ass dreams. I'm talking about Inception level, where I'm 3, 4 dreams down. You know what I'm saying? And like, I'll wake up in a dream, do some more stuff, then wake up out of that dream into another dream, and then finally wake up late. Dude, it's not exhausting, it's staggering. It's staggering because the awareness and comprehension level that you shake yourself into when you do that. And these levels of dreams, man, like I'm completely immersed in them. I'm wearing different clothes in each level. I got different vehicles on I got a helicopter on this one. I got an airplane on this one. I'm driving a car on this one. All in different levels, man. You know what I'm saying? They're like different G.I. Joe episodes. Okay? Like each one is crazy, dude. Yeah. Like,
Look, it's a Simpson episode where like, okay, like you straight up you realize you're in the middle of some shit, but you didn't realize that you was in the middle of two different things. Rick and Morty. Yeah, like, okay, you're a simulation inside a simulation inside a simulation, and so
yeah, you the man next to the man next to the man next to the goddamn man.
And so only through practice, only through our life experiences were we able to comprehend what was really happening, and that this is layered. This ain't just one experience. You had talked about an experience you had before, going someplace. Well, I remember, like my homeboy had died. I remember we were driving like to Denver or someplace, and we're driving on this road, and it's a highway. You got cornfields on both sides, and I just remember this big ass owl like flying them into the windshield of the car. I'm like, holy shit!
Hold on, wait a minute. Stop. You saw an owl? It flew by the car?
Dude, it flew into the front, almost to the windshield, and flies up.
Okay, but hang on a second. How long after that did they die?
Oh no, years later. No,
okay.
They passed about it's been 3.5 years. Well, we had that experience years ago. I mean, literally college. And then the reason I brought it up is because I drove to see him a couple times. I mean, the first time I drove to see him, the movie that just came out was the Blair Witch Project. I've talked about this before, where I said they had a treatment on the Sci-Fi Channel where they were like going into the history of the Blair Witch, and they had all this, and that was actually scarier than the movie.
Yeah.
So I'm driving to Denver for his wedding or whatever, and I'm driving to Denver, and when I say nothing but cornfields, this is literally, because I'm going from Nebraska to Colorado, and there's a stretch literally maybe 20, 30 miles.
Jeepers Creepers.
It's nothing but
Jeepers Creepers
on both sides, and it's straight up like children in the corn shit. Like, this shit is scary as fuck. I just seen a half-ass horror movie. I'm driving, so I'm doing 105 miles an hour. Not because I'm in a hurry to get there. I'm in a hurry to get out this situation. I'm like, dude, I don't know where the fuck I'm at. There's no point of reference. And then after you get past the cornfield, it's nothing but plains. It's literally where you might see a cow or a buffalo, and it's sharing the same land. That's how this shit is. And, like, that wasn't scary to me. But that corn, I don't know why, but that corn was scary as fuck. So, I don't know. Again, residual energy. Is some Native Americans mad because you put corn on their land, or are they mad because you stole corn from them? And you're still, I don't know. But sometimes there's sorrow there. Sometimes the anxiety. Sometimes that fear. It's not even your fear; it's somebody else's fear. And that's what we mean when you see when you see the invisible world. When you recognize that you're passing through somebody else's emotion, somebody else's shit, and just because it clings to you doesn't mean that sometimes you should be like, okay, cool. But I'm telling you, I was experiencing some shit. I was scared, and I don't know whose fear it was or whose experience I was going through. But I was terrified. That's why I driving back didn't bother me.
Okay.
But going to Colorado, shit.
I remember the time you told me about. See, look, y'all need to understand something. This motherfucker here, he sees cryptozoological creatures. He sees UFOs. He sees weird type of omens and shit. This dude sees all kinds of shit all the time. This motherfucker sees secret space program launches all the time. Like this dude lives in a cartoon. I swear to God he does. But it's fascinating because he'll like call me up and tell me about this shit. And I'm like, okay, all right, give me the details. You know what I'm saying? Because like my thing is like I want the details. Like I want the skinny. Like break it down. What
he does it. What time was it? What direction were you facing? What did you eat for breakfast?
Exactly.
Like,
what was the elevation?
No.
What was the markings on the spacecraft? Like, what was the fur on the color of the fur on the creature that you saw, or what was the sound like? How did it make you feel? Like all these, because it's important. These details, because what you're doing is you're okay. What we're doing when we do that is we're doing what Aboriginal people in Australia call dream time. And their dream time is when they recreate reality. They recreate the memory of a reality. And so by speaking into it, we're creating that energy again and opening that door back into that moment. So this is something I want to speak to is because, okay, you've had your run-ins with cryptozoological creatures. And so this is the thing. They occupy a different world than we do. They view this world from the outside, and we view their world we view this world differently than they do. And so it makes you wonder, okay, so where the fuck are they at right now? While people are at Starbucks, you know what I'm saying, and while motherfuckers are in skyscrapers folding papers and like, you know, sending off stuff to Dubai via FedEx and shit, what the fuck are they doing right now? Where are they at? Like,
Look, the question he's asking are simple investigator questions. Because it's not disbelief. He's not believing me. He's trying to be transformed to that situation. So I can like, oh, what were you experiencing?
Like my question is like, does that motherfucker have a living room? You know what I'm saying? Like, what is this person doing right now? What is this creature doing? Like, where the fuck are they sleeping at? See what I'm saying? Do they have a nest? Do they have a den?
Is there multiple ones? Are there a mating pair? Also, another thing, sometimes when you don't have a point of reference, it's even hard to have that experience. I remember Professor, I hope he hasn't passed yet, but at my college, Dr. Evans, I talked about him before, but he had talked about, he explained his grandmother was a seer. He also explained that you have a guardian angel. And sometimes you don't recognize your guardian angel. I remember your mom talked about guardian angels. And people, when they hear this stuff, they're looking for that traditional Christian, this white lady with wings and white man with wings and soft. No. When he explained his guardian angel was his grandmother, and he had talked about her dying. And one time they were doing something, they were planning her funeral or whatever, and the spider runs out, and he puts his hand on top of the spider, and the spider disappears. Richard Pryor talks about the same thing when he was fucking with Miss Rudolph. He said that spider disappeared. So when you hear that, when somebody introduces you to that other world, and you realize that many of the natural things that we see are actually spiritual things. Earlier, you talked about people being dog, cat people. Native Americans say you have a spirit animal. You know, some kind of way you're attached to the wolf, or your spirit animal is a boar, or that's some real shit. So, when he was telling me about your guardian angel will appear sometimes when you're going to have a life or death experience beforehand to warn you. And he's breaking all this. We in class. It wasn't even like English class. He was like an English professor, but he was telling about his experiences in the Vietnam War and coming close to death. And he said, he had a flashback, and he said, so I'm in Vietnam War, and they didn't demilitarize you. They just sent you back to work. So he said, can you imagine the first time I'm in class and I have a South Vietnamese child in my class, and all of a sudden I have a flashback? Or he talked about he saw a guy get beheaded and he had a flashback, that kind of shit. Well, all the stuff he would talk about, I would take with me. Well, one time I had a near-death experience, but again, I didn't know I was going to have it. I'm in my room. It's summertime in the dorm, and everybody else has went home. So there's only like 3 or 4 of us on campus. I'm taking summer classes. I didn't have no place else to go, so I'm in my dorm. Well, I'm sitting there, and I see something run across the floor like a mouse, but it's not a mouse. And I look for it. And it's just like he described. This shit hits the wall and disappears.
Oh, I used to see shit like that all the time. All the time.
That was my guardian angel. So fast forward, is me and Dede and my brother that passed, and my girl at the time, and we are in Stillwater, Oklahoma, and we're driving. And I probably said this on the air before, and I'm driving, I'm at a stoplight, and I don't go. And they're like, go, go, go. I'm like, go. And all of a sudden, this big-ass dump truck with all these metal in the back ran a red light and almost hit other people. But because I saw my guardian angel, I knew the rest of the day to be on high alert. You know, I knew because if I see my guardian angel, they're guarding you. So I knew for the rest of the day, the rest of whatever, that I need to be on the lookout for a life or death situation. And all that goes back to what Dr. Evans explained to us. He talked about his grandmother being a seer, talking about his grandmother being, and again, when you deal with a real seer, they're not talking all this shit about lottery tickets and money and football scores. They're like, you need to be aware of this. This is some shit that's going to hit you. He had talked about having an out-of-body experience, how his grandmother helped him to leave his body. And he left his body, and he said your physical body is, you can see all the disease. You can see the worms and bacteria. He said when your spirit looks back at your physical body, it's disgusting. He said, so he's going around his room, his spirit, and he said he wanted to look at himself in the mirror. He wanted to see what his spirit looked like. And it was an experience. He finally did it. He said, I kept closing my eyes, but I finally forced my eyes. We're talking about spirit. He said, I forced myself to look at myself in the mirror, and you see how beautiful your spirit is. It was a stark contrast to the physical body that he had just left, and he's looking back at. So his grandmother helps him back into his body, yada yada yada. I don't care if y'all understand, believe, whatever, but once somebody gives you, this is how life is supposed to be. The reason you have teachers, the reason you have parents are supposed to guide you. You know, we don't all have good parents. My father wasn't the best. My mom is awesome. So that's what they're supposed to like teach you how to do shit and how to be an adult, how to transition into adulthood, recognize what's going to happen, blah blah blah. Well, it's the same thing when you have a teacher. Well, I had this professor in college that was talking some crazy shit, but everything he talked about, I started experiencing similar things, and I'm like, I had to thank him for opening my eyes. I had to thank him for creating the possibility for me to experience these things, because I could dismiss them away. I could just completely dismiss this shit. This is just the wind blowing. This ain't got nothing to do with anything. Yeah, all that shit. No. Because of him, I was able to recognize that my guardian angel. I've had other spots where my guardian angel gave me a heads up. They weren't as clear as this one. You know what I'm saying? But because of him being an educator, enlightener, awakening things in me, because of the other one, my professor, my philosophy professor in college, Ron Keyes. Yeah, I hope he's still around. He was like, "Hey, man," he said, he used to mess my name up, but he said, "You're from the birthplace of Malcolm X, brother. You're destined for so much more." And when those people pour their knowledge into you, and all you can do is accept it, and like you're anointed. These people were anointing me with all kinds of light and knowledge and spirit from your ancestors, that kind of shit. So now when I see stuff, it also gives me a reference point to where I can describe it better too. I'm like, "Hey, bro, I went through this." You know, I saw this, and now I be filming shit all because, you know, my brother is straight up a film guy. Like, look, it's not because it's disbelief, it's because I'm trying to show you, like, right, this
documentation.
That's strictly documentation. It's not proof in the sense, but it's documentation. Like, hey, this is where I was, and even in the stuff he's talking about, I'm showing, like, look, do you see this contrail that it is going horizontal, that it reverts up? If this thing is turned and goes up, that's not a plane. that's some other shit they're testing right now.
But see, that brings to mind the parts of the physical world that remain invisible to most people because they don't pay attention to it all the time. Like these things in the sky, these chemtrails that people barely pay attention to, or these vertical launches that you're seeing that are part of the secret space program. All these weird things that are going on that are outside the public purview, and it creates a different layer. I mean, it's listen. These people can get away with these things because they know people are dumb. They know people don't pay attention. But really, what we're getting at here is that there's things that you have to begin to drawing your attention to. Hell, there's so much entertainment that's free. Straight up, there's so much stuff out here to entertain you that you don't have to pay a dime for. All you have to do is just go and explore. And I'm talking about you don't even have to look up stuff on your phone. Straight up, like this stuff that requires no internet search engine nonsense, phone calls, nothing. There's stuff that all you got to do is go into the woods, look up at the sky, start asking questions about things that you see. You know, hell, go to the library and dig up some of this information because guess what? A lot of these old books of knowledge are not online. You have to go to archives and go and dig these things up. One time, I was working at this university, and we were unloading something next to this dumpster, and they must have thrown away about 20,000 books. And I looked at these books. I jumped into the dumpster because it was just all books. And I jumped to this dumpster, man, and there were all types of books about ancient Egypt and Kemet and Mesopotamia and ancient civilizations and
Man, it's so many books,
dude. And I'm like, what the? It almost felt criminal, like they were throwing all this shit away. I'm like, are you serious? This is garbage to y'all? Like, dude, this is a feast to feed mentally impoverished people. You know, intellectually impoverished people. You know what I mean? Like, it's just madness. But again, this invisible world that is all around us, and there's so much stuff out there for you to just get up off your ass, and you have to go explore it. That's really an underlying part of what we're saying here. Is you really need to get off your ass and go and explore some shit. You have to go. You got to go on a fucking adventure. Listen, how many of you out there as
Don't
kids? Yes, man. How many of you people out there as children used to love to go on quote unquote adventures? Every last one of you. Every last one of you will get fucking psyched to know that you was about to go on a mission or something and go somewhere and see something. It could be whatever, a dead body or some weird creature that they say lives in the woods or lives by the edge of the lake or something like that. You want to go and you want to see this shit for yourself. You want to know. You want to see it with your own eyes, and you want to have the experience, because just seeing things through the eyes of people on the internet, this is not. It's documentation. That's great. Okay, I'll give you that. That's proof of somebody else doing it. But when you do it yourself, when you're the one setting it off, it's a whole different thing. All those great photographs online of the West and, you know, the natural beauty of like the world, dude, until you're jumping into that crystal clear ocean water and you're looking down at the bottom and you can see your feet by standing up and looking down at your toes in the Caribbean water, dude, that's an experience that you have to be there for. You know what I mean? Like this.
Look, we're spoiled by the internet. We're so spoiled because some of these amazing events ain't amazing no more because we've seen other people go through them. But then we didn't experience them for ourselves, not realizing that we can have a completely different take on the situation when you go through it. But we're spoiled by that shit. Like, okay, I can Google anything. Africa, okay, I can look up a country in Africa. It's not the same as going there and touching ground and experiencing your ancestors.
You got to go.
You know, or you're native. We're native too. there's certain spots in this country where our ancestors were living and experiencing it. You touch that ground, you're going to have a different experience. It's going to resonate with you.
Dude, what's crazy is that the church experience in North America is different from the church experience in Europe, for example. If you ever go to Europe and you find yourself in the UK, plan a trip, make a day trip to a cathedral, to an old cathedral, because you will be shocked by what you see. If you look at some of the stained glass windows, the art in the stained glass windows has messages hidden in it. Hidden in those stained glass art is there's Jesus in a Merkabah. And you're like, what is a Merkabah? Well, when you start getting into like sacred geometry and sacred science, you learn that a Merkabah is the Ba and the Ka, and it's the vessel for the soul, spirit body. And Ba and the Ka is from Egypt. Okay, so this is a vessel for the spirit body. So yeah, do yourself a favor, go look up Merkabah, Merkabah, Merkaba. And when you look that up and you see what it is, it looks like two triangles superimposed over each other. And it kind of looks like the Star of David. But you get a bunch of those together superimposed over each other, and you get the flower of life, which represents the thumbprint of creation. And you see these in stained glass windows all over Europe. Now, what that represents is the knowledge of the Melchizedek order, and they were the Jedis in the Bible. They were the ones that taught Jesus. The wise men in the Bible who showed up when Jesus was born were of the Melchizedek order. These were the Jedi, and they showed up for the birth of one of the most powerful Jedis of all time. So, this stuff is hidden in plain sight. It's invisible, but it's visible. You see, it's there all around you. You just have to have eyes to see it, is what I'm saying. And so, but you have to, this is the crazy part, you have to go there to see this shit. Because when you see this and there's sunlight shining through this, you have this moment.
Yes.
And really, you need to go out there and get more moments in your life. You need more in your life. Seriously, because that is enlightenment. But you don't get enlightenment secondhand. You know, Duct Tape is talking about how he had a mentor in college who bestowed upon him all this wisdom. You weren't going to get that secondhand. You had to be there, ass on the curb, listening to this dude talk. You know what I'm saying?
That's the same problem right now with this online education. We think that we can acquire the same thing online. You think that when you read a book, it sparks your interest. You study to physically go there. When you online, we got a class. I got a professor talking to me. It's not the same. You need to be in there. When they impart that knowledge, it's going to hit you differently when you're staring at them, and their enlightenment hits. Or you're there, you read about it, but you went there and experienced that beach, and then like, wow. Or you went to see this ruin where your ancestors were.
It's like a difference between going to a comedy show and seeing a comic on stage and feeling the energy in the room, or watching a stand-up comic on TV. Two totally different things. The same comic can be funny, but you will be falling out of your chair in person. You know, it's a hypnotic event. It really is, man. It's a trip, but you have to go there and see it. But we use that analogy to discuss these worlds that have to be experienced firsthand. And enlightenment happens firsthand. You have to be there for it. You got to be committed to the moment by investing the time to going to these invisible worlds and stepping through these doors, because that is your ticket to enlightenment. We out. Peace.
Holla back.